Good God.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that every time I hear it.
Yeah. So yesterday,
Story time.
Yes, or was it? Yeah, yesterday, Friday. I went into a place that usually we do not name.
This is going to make me angry. I mean, we do name it.
Yeah, because fuck GameStop.
Word. Fuck GameStop.
So I was in there because a week ago, and I'm a big Zelda fan. I've got Zelda shirts and I've got Zelda shit on my wall, and my fucking wedding
Quick side note.
My fucking wedding ring's Zelda.
Can we, like, just a quick side note, not just fuck GameStop, but fuck scalpers, because in this room right now is every Zelda amiibo that exists minus one.
Minus one.
And if you go look for the Loftwing amiibo right now, you'll be upset because it's like the $25 Loftwing amiibo is like anywhere between $60 and $150.
Yeah.
Plus some crazy ass shipping.
Plus $25 in
like
shipping.
PlayAsia.com doesn't have it. And that's how you know there's a problem. But anyway, I was in GameStop on Friday, yesterday, to try and find that. To just like see if we got it. Because I'm like, when Breath of the Wild came out, like I was ambitious. Like I was like, I'm getting this. I'm getting all of these. Yep.
Like I'm hunting these down. I'm finding these fucking things. Like whatever. Then the Champions came out, and I was in store day one. Like, you know, the doors unlocked, and I walked in, and I'm like, do you have them? I'm not sure what. Fucking open the box.
Yeah, let's.
We haven't unpacked any. I don't give a shit. I will throw this whole place into turmoil. Open the box. Like end of 7. Open the box. And anyway, I was in there. I was looking around, and they didn't have it. And of course, they give me some shitball story of. I asked one of the guy, and I don't know why they have the weirdness. At least maybe our local one, but they hire the most socially awkward, creepy motherfuckers, like just short of like, you know, Silence of the Lambs and Buffalo Bill kind of shit.
It didn't used to be that way, but yeah, I rarely go in there. But from the anecdotes I've heard and the times I've gone past, I can concur. Don't write emails. We don't care.
So the guy I asked, I was like, hey, just as a thing, like, did you get any of these in? How many did you get in? And like, what's the chance of you getting one in store? And he's like, oh, well, that amiibo is exclusive to GameStop online. And I'm like, no, it isn't. It's not. I'm like, you had like, what did they have that was exclusive? Was it the
Diablo amiibo?
The Diablo amiibo was exclusive to them. But in any case, Zelda's not playing that shit.
For that. God damn it.
But Zelda's not like, they're not playing that shit for Zelda. They're like, we're not going to give it to GameStop as an exclusive. No, fuck you. But he's like, it's an exclusive to GameStop. It was only online and we're sold out, you know, company wide. And then he proceeds to like give me the hairy eyeball with the eyebrows and shit. Like he looks down like at a side, and then he like cartoonishly like.
I'm picturing like what that looks like as like an emoji.
The mask with Jim Carrey, like his head's down, and then his eyebrows move excitedly fast up and down at me, and I'm like, all right, I'm gonna go then. I'm like, I hadn't even bought Skyward Sword yet, the remake yet. I did because I proceeded to leave that store, go next door to Target, and purchase it there. but like that, whatever the whole thing was of whatever it was that he said, sounded like, number one, a lie. And number two, like, is he flirting with me? I don't know what's going on. Like, listen, dude, like,
yeah.
back up.
It ain't that kind of party.
But while I was there, I looked at the wall, and there's a remake, another remake, a series of remakes from Oddworld. Do you remember Oddworld? From, God, it would have been the late 90s into the, like, early 2000s.
I remember Oddworld.
It was a pack. It was like a 3-pack, and it was Oddworld, New and Tasty, I think was the name of it, and it was like Abe's Odyssey. Like it had like several
like Odyssey, Exodus, and
yeah, and then there was like something about the stranger, and then something else about like a critter egg hunting or like more. I don't know, whatever. It was they always had bizarro fucking games. But I was like, oh, I remember that. And I'm hoping, I didn't purchase it, but I might, because I'm hoping that like some of these remakes like Zelda, like those are going to sell because people want to nostalgia the shit out of things. But like that is a game that could do with like a franchise reinvigoration to kind of get it to a current market, you know, like to get people to be like, oh, what's this? And play it and be like, oh, this is, and like, yeah, this is a remake of a game from 97. Like,
and interestingly enough,
you weren't alive then. Like you're 20 now, but like you weren't alive then. And like, this was a great game back then.
But interestingly enough, Oddworld has had some like new games that have like come out. I know, I don't remember the name of it because, you know, when you have a PlayStation, you go to PS Plus and a game comes up, you're just like, add to library. And then you tell yourself, like, I'm going to play this later.
Yeah.
You never fucking play it later. You go through your collection and you're like, God, when did I get all these games? But there was an Oddworld game that came out recently, and it was a PS Plus, like, here you go. Here's a free joint. And so it was really cool to see the new IP for it versus like say them saying like, hey, here's the game and we just rebuilt it from the ground up. Yeah. Here's a new one. Like
I think last year at E3 there was like the guy who originally wrote the story and wrote it, like created it, was like, yeah, I bought the game back from whoever it belonged to at the time, because that was what Oddworld really suffered from, was that it went through a series of development companies and it was sold from one to the other. It didn't stay with a platform. Like it wasn't placed, like it was only on PlayStation, then it was only on Xbox, then it was only on PC, and it was bouncing around all over the place. And like, it's hard to kind of lock that down over like, 10 years or whatever. But I think the developer bought it back and he's like, hey, me and this other company that we've been doing have put together a game. And I think that's what you might have seen was that. And he's trying to like reboot this thing. Which all the luck in the world to him.
Yeah, all the power, and I want to see it. I want to see it be successful because it's a franchise. Like you have your classics, Mario, Zelda, right? You have even for PlayStation, like you have your Tomb Raiders and things like that. Oh
yeah, Tomb Raider.
And Halo and all those things that are
the
like
Master Chief Edition, where it's like every Master Chief game and what. Yeah.
So, but there are so many like. And I say this, but I don't mean this, like on the cutting room floor type games that are like, hey, when you hear about it, like Kane, Legacy of Kane,
Legacy of Kane, and
like
Soul Reaver,
and when if that shit was to be like, hey, we're remaking that, what?
Well, yeah,
or not remaking, and that, I guess, you know what, we're sufficiently in. I'm Jeff.
Before we get into another 20 to 5 minute diatribe, I am Adam. This is the End of the Species broadcast. You can find us on our socials at I am at Tatooine Hermit on Instagram.
Yeah, let's get that out of the way too. I'm Zeus and Jeff, because I think when we're done with this, we're not going to want to do it at the end. So if you didn't catch it at 8:21 in, then you didn't catch it. That's just what it is. But no, Legacy of Kane.
I loved Blood Omen. Like that was the like those. I was like to be like a badass like vampire lord, like conquering whatever it was that he was conquering. I can't even fucking remember. I don't remember if it was like a country or like another set of vampire. I don't think it mattered.
I know there's a lore to it, but I don't think it mattered. And that coincidentally was also the greatness of games back then, because like. I'll use World of Warcraft as an example. Like when I played,
that's just as a thing. They have vanilla, or they call it classic. But they're like that's rebooted. Like you want to we fucking rebooted that shit too.
And when I first got into when you got me into World of Warcraft, you were like, "Hey, so did you ever play Warcraft 1, 2, and 3?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Well, this is the story of that. And I'm like, "There was a story?" Like.
I had guys collect wood.
I sent guys to cut wood. I sent other guys to do a thing, and then I went over and I killed the other guys. Like that's what it was. There was a story to that. And so there's the beauty of games back then is that there could have been a huge deep lore, but we're assholes. We're like
little kids. Like,
and depending on how it was portrayed, like if it was only portrayed in like a couple of little cutscenes and like you had to read the manual
with the scrolling text,
or you had to, even worse, if you had to read the Prima strategy guide or whatever that was to figure out what the fuck was going on, you weren't doing that.
No,
like you're like, where's the secret thing that I need to get the upgrade? Like that, okay, it's in this part of the level.
But you know,
like,
somebody,
that's all you would do.
Somebody at Blizzard, somebody at whoever did Legacy of Kain, they painstakingly put together.
Was that EoaS?
Oh, it was. I'm gonna have to look that up, but I'm pretty sure it was.
Okay.
But they took their time to put together this wonderful story, and we just fucking ignored it. And I don't even feel bad.
I can drink blood from a dude over there through the air, like I'm sucking in it. Like or like in Soul Reaver, like not as a thing. But like there's a new game coming out where I think it's called Medium, and you're able to like play the game in 2 different worlds. Like you play through here and it's dangerous, and you play over here, but like it's more dangerous because there's spirits and whatever. What did Soul Reaver do? It did that exact goddamn thing, and they're making it like it's this huge fucking deal of like, oh, it's so innovative. And I'm like, we did this back in the 2000s. Like, where have you been?
You're about to feel bad, and I already feel bad. Legacy, because we went through this. We went through this with Legacy of Kain, and Legacy of Kain was developed by Crystal Dynamics, and we totally went into this when we talked about Avengers.
Yeah,
that'll be a whole other retrospective episode. I apologize. I put my hand up, but yeah, that was definitely Crystal Dynamics, and what a powerhouse company, and we just anyway. But like, okay, so here's the question that we want to ask. Like, as far as remakes go, though, I often wonder for remakes, is it worth rebuilding a game from the ground up? Like, it's one thing to say like, hey, we're gonna take this game that was in 480p and we're gonna re-release the exact same game, like they did with Ratchet and Clank, like they did with Skyward Sword. They say it's the exact same game, pixel for pixel. We're just updating it,
smoothing the edges.
Yeah, you're not going to see the little sprinkle of anti-aliasing that's missing and all this other stuff.
The control's more responsive because sometimes the Wii controller was winky, hinky, whatever. And it's like, okay, this is the 3rd time in a half hour I've had to recalibrate it. Like, can I just open the door? That's all I want to do.
I'd like to slash do the sky beam. Is it
Skyward
strike at the I-beam, but for some reason, Link wants to go 2 degrees to the right or 2 degrees to the left, and it's not hitting me with the thing. But so there's that. Versus like what they did with Final Fantasy VII, which is like,
that's a ground up.
Yeah, like we're reimagining this story. There's new plot. There's characters that weren't in the. I've for a long, and I've told you this before. Like, even though I've played the Final Fantasy VII remake, I've always had an issue with the fact that like Final Fantasy remake is episodic, and it's the training section of Final Fantasy VII. Like, Final Fantasy VII has so much to it, and Midgar is like the this is how you play.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with this is how you don't play. But like the this is how you play section is that's it, right?
Right.
So yeah, like looking at like a remake versus a reimagining, and there have been a ton of both kinds over the past like I feel
just
like
the last couple of years.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Nintendo's doing the same thing too, because they did it with Link's Awakening.
Yeah.
Like that was like same kind of concept, but like completely redone from the ground up kind of a thing.
I feel like when Nintendo does it, and I don't want to sound like a Nintendo apologist, and there is an example of them doing it the other way. It's like when they did it with Link's Awakening, they're not going to release a game, a Game Boy Color game on the Switch. So it makes sense. Now, Nintendo is in no way innocent in like the remake department. Like a lot of their games,
they're probably some of the most guilty.
Yeah,
I would
like
say
a lot of their games, even when it's new IP, like the entire Legend of Zelda series that we love, from Ocarina of Time to Skyward Sword, it's You know,
Yeah,
you can spot the story beats.
New console? Here it is again.
Yeah.
Like here, remap to your controller.
We're going after Ganondorf yet again. Let's go. No, but so and there's again the pretty much anything significant that came out on the Wii U has had a new life in a deluxe HD or otherwise special edition on the Switch. That's y'all's fault. That's y'all's fault.
Yeah. If you bought the Wii U, like, it would still be around.
Yeah. Adam and I played our part. We bought our Wii U's and we played them to death. So that's you guys' fault.
Yeah.
Y'all did that.
Mm-hmm.
You should be ashamed of yourself. But anyway, remakes. There's so many that there's almost more remakes and reboots and retcons in video games than there are new
things that are worth playing.
New games. So
and not to say that like some of these indie titles that like are, you know, as good as, you know, a AAA title or as smooth as one, like don't deserve any kind of praise or whatever, but like, you know, a lot of the big studios kind of like what, you know, how movies were, you know, kind of a little pre-MCU where it was kind of like, oh, we're redoing all these, you know, 80s and 90s movies. And I'm like, it was just done like 10 years ago. Do we really need to start that over? And even then, like, I see it coming because now we've got Avatar 2 through 5 we're going to look forward to. We're restarting a Batman again.
I'm not even
like we've got Matrix 4 coming. Like didn't we say enough in the Matrix 1, 2, and 3? Like must we have a 4?
And I will say, like, I thought like having another Men in Black was even egregious. But like I'll say this, and I'm not even
they should have stopped it too.
I'm not embarrassed or sorry about this. I've never seen Avatar.
Really? Yeah. I didn't. Oh, you know what? I can agree with that. I never saw it until Disney Plus came out, which was so like I never saw it. Like my wife had, but because she went with a family troupe, like, you know, and went and saw it. And, you know, I looked at it and I was like, meh. But like going back and rewatching it, it's a good movie. I don't see how it got the following that it did because it's Fern Gully in space. But like,
when somebody described the plot to me, I was like, it's Pocahontas with blue people. Like, that's what it seemed like to me. Fern Gully, I can see that as well.
It's Fern Gully in space. And, like, the fairies are blue people, and humans are humans doing the human thing of just destroy and consume. But, like...
See that, Gen Z? Your childhood is just our childhood, just not as good.
Yeah. But... The whole thing of remaking movies and turning it into, you know, something for a newer audience to consume, I can only imagine is to appeal to a younger generation to like reinvigorate a franchise. And that's kind of what I see with the way they're doing video games. And there's a lot of really quality, like completely playable, like even in its current state, video games from the 80s and 90s, but like with me, like so my first foray into Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy X. I kind of started there and I kind of stopped there. I played Final Fantasy X, was kind of wowed by like gameplay and like it was very interesting to have like a turn-based combat system. And I talked to a guy that I worked with, his name was Bobby, and he was like, oh no, 7 is really where it's at, 8's really good too. Nine's pretty awesome, but it's not as good as 7 and 8 and whatever. And I'm like, okay. So one day at Walmart, I found Final Fantasy 7 in a box, like in the game cabinet, you know, all 4 discs of it.
Yikes.
And I picked it up and I was like, well, give it a shot. And I could not play it for more than like 15 minutes because I was like, this is hideous. Like it didn't age well. And I was looking at it. Excuse me. And I was looking at it and I'm like, this isn't that much older. I mean, it's like 4 or 5 years from Final Fantasy. Like, it shouldn't be on this kind of a level. But, I mean, it's just, that's also, I guess, just a show of how video games and computers, like, make leaps and bounds over a short amount of time, is that we went from that to 10. And I'm like, 10 was beautiful to look at. 7 was an eyesore.
And you know what else with 10 was? It was the first one, if I remember, with the voice acting.
With the voice dialogue, yeah.
And the voice acting was Oh, like I went back to play. Like I have Final Fantasy X for Switch, and I have to do it in shifts. Like there will be a time where I'm like, I want to play an RPG, and I go back. I jump between 10 and 12 because 10 I like better, but I can only. It's rough, man.
Well, and I feel that way with the Resident Evils too, because like the Resident Evil original had voice dialogue on the PlayStation. Like, I mean, it was a much shorter game, but like on the original, it was like these had to have been people that were American, but had lived in Japan so long before they recorded stuff that they forgot how English sounds. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "No, don't open that door." And I'm like. Oh God, I'm surprised. Like going back and looking at it now, I'm like, I'm surprised I was scared. Like, because I remember playing the original Resident Evil at 1 o'clock in the morning, all the lights off in the house, and you hear just with the loud footsteps, and then you come around.
And that was before headphones. Like your sounds were coming out of the CRT,
the CRT like, tube television,
the little tiny speaker at the bottom of the TV,
and like. And like then you hear, and they had it sounded like people walking in wet boots, like that was the zombie footprint or the footstep was like. I'm like they're still human, like they're still humans that are together mostly, like they're not. I'm like it's everyone took a bath before they turned into a zombie, whatever, in fully clothed, but like I was and like hearing that sound and I'm like. Oh no, where is it coming from? But like that's also probably like, a sign of like how they could do so much with so little because, everything in that first game was about angles. Mm-hmm. Like the camera sits at a particular angle and you control your character with the tank controls. And like if there was a corner there, then like you don't know what's around it until you get around it and the camera changes. And like as soon as that camera changes, like, oh no, there's a thing and it's attacking me, and now you have to run and turn around and whatever. It was rough.
And that just got remade. Not
Zero got remade on GameCube. But like, I don't think it's been remade since then.
But Resident Evil 2 and 3 got remade.
2 and 3 got remade in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
And 2 is a masterpiece. Like 2 was a masterpiece on PlayStation 1. On the remake, whoo, that is some beautiful game design. Like that is genius.
So here's my question. And I think I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If the original 2 was a masterpiece, why remake it?
Well, that's if I had to do a thing, they right before they did the remake of 2, they did the remake of 7. So what happened with 7 was Capcom needed, like, they weren't happy with any of the tools or anything that they had for game development. So what they did is they built something called the RE engine, the Resident Evil engine, but RE actually stands for something else. It's something ridiculous. I don't remember what it is, but it's like
Retsukuken entropy
it's something like radiological everlight or some nonsense, like doesn't like it has no comparison, but like they call it the RE engine, and there's like a zombie hand over a moon, and I'm like, Resident Evil engine, right? No,
the first person to pedantically correct Adam and give us the actual name of the engine gets nothing.
But so they built that engine and redesigned Resident Evil 7 for being a first person game. And with that whole thing, they're like, oh, look at the skin, like, look at the people, look at this, look at the water effects, look at all this stuff. And then they had gone through a remake process where they had remade, almost 10 years ago, Resident Evil, or the original, on GameCube and got accolades for it. Like, they added new areas, they fixed a lot of controls, they added storyline, and the dialogue was updated, which is the biggest thing. And they got
like what they
did
with Silent Hill on Wii.
Yeah, exactly. And then they did a new one in that kind of like game where they did Resident Evil 0, which I liked it. I don't know how. Anyway, so they wanted to show like, hey, look what we could do with this engine, and we'll take 2, one of the next logical one. If we're gonna remake them from like oldest to newest, that's the next logical one to do. So let's do 2. And they got new voice actors, new direction. Like they made it an over-the-shoulder one, like they had done for the last couple of Resident Evil games. They have new hit physics and new water, and, and lighting effects and all this kind of stuff that they just forced into this game. And they cut a couple of corners here and there for like some of the sections of the game, like just to make everything kind of more cohesive. But overall, like kept it very true to the original. And the only thing I can think of for the reason for that was that like this is the next logical step in their remake series, and it would draw in a whole lot new, onlookers and attention, and drum up new interest for some of the old stuff, and reinvigorate where they were coming from, because they have the new thing with Ethan. Started that over, and they're like, in 7, Ethan was kind of a potato.
Yeah.
Like his character development was bare 0. 8, way better. But, I actually liked Ethan a lot in 8, as opposed to in 7, where it was just kind of like just yelling to be mad and stuff, but like fucking poor Ethan's hands, man. Just every time, like whatever. And then the next year they did a remake of 3, and it was good. It was very good. It wasn't what the original 3 was, because they probably cut about 2 hours of gameplay out of the original to streamline it. Now, it's not that what they did is bad, but they removed like whole sections of maps, and like there was a cemetery that they removed. There's a clock tower that they removed, like specific fights and whatnot. And Nemesis replaced Mr. X from 2, and yeah, he had this whole thing where he would follow you around, but like also it was much more instanced. Like in 2, Mr. X followed you through that whole goddamn police department. Like there was a couple of rooms, like the save room and a couple other rooms he just couldn't go in, because that's where story beats happened. Like certain story beats that couldn't really get interfered by like, oh, here comes the guy. But everywhere else in that place, like this dude fucking followed you the fuck around. Like he's coming for you. In 3, there's a couple of things where it's like, if you once Nemesis showed up, if you could get to the next blah, he won't show up again. And it was kind of like, oh, I expected him to like follow me through the door and follow me through here, follow me through that, and he just didn't. So that was kind of like flip-flopped what happened with the originals. In 2, Mr. X had story beats where he would show up, do a thing, and if you got out of the room fast enough, or had enough ammunition to take him down, that was it. You move on and you continue with the storyline, and he doesn't follow you anymore. In Nemesis, unless you took him down, and were able to get enough, because it was loading screens, get enough, like 3 or 4 loading screens away from him, after a few minutes, he'd stand back up and keep chasing you from screen to screen to screen to screen. And it was like, oh, this is terrifying. So it was kind of a flip flop for that, but I don't know. But it was short of it, because like now I've tangent.
No, but it's good background to have in case, because I've only recently gotten into Resident Evil, and I know the lore from watching videos that catch me up.
Yeah,
right. So it's good to know from the like outside of the lore, from like the gameplay perspective.
Yeah,
like I wasn't around, like I wasn't into Resident Evil when it first came out, and so knowing that, it actually gives me good perspective.
So that's kind of the same thing. It's like, these things happen, there's a remake, and then you're kind of like, oh, let me maybe check that out and see what this is about.
Where's my favorite part, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, but the reason that I asked why remake it is because there are games where the game gets remade and fans like, we go back to Final Fantasy VII constantly. But fans clamored for that.
That's that's probably the staunchest like change in direction.
Yeah,
like
Well, because like
that was a turn-based thing, and like I haven't played Final Fantasy VII, but like it's kind of like an action combat game now, right?
it's like an action RPG. It still has the RPG elements, but
yeah, because like you have a level system and you have like sword damage and
it's more
else.
an evolution of like, because Final Fantasy as a whole turned into an evolution of Kingdom Hearts and less of an evolution of Final Fantasy, where it's like for Final Fantasy 15, you basically hold down the attack button and you're just doing combos. And with this, it's similar in that there are two different, like each character has two different forms, and you have to be cognizant of dodging and blocking. So it has those action elements while you're still, like if you go into a room and you're not leveled up enough, or you don't have enough of a spell of your MP stocked up, blah, 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 you're not gonna, it's the classic RPG thing of like, well, level up your character.
Yeah,
but
go do some side quests, newbie.
The remake is balanced enough where it doesn't really have places where you're grinding.
Okay,
so you're not gonna go into like the last half of the game and be like level 99. You're gonna be.
Well, I remember that kind of in 10. Like if you like hardcore like beeline for story beats. Like you eventually get to a point where you're supposed to see more.
You get to see more, and that's what that Seymour was the test. Like, did you play enough?
No,
nah, you're dead.
Yeah, like before you go into like a castle where it's like, okay, here's a series of story, but like also it's like a room to like you go room to room of like boss battles, and like when you get to like maybe you can handle those first couple of boss battles, but then you get to like the last guy. It's like, nah, because like you missed, you left town and like now you're in the fortress and you left town and
you didn't rescue enough kittens.
And like, you left, a dozen side quests and like little old ladies that needed you to go pick up fruit for them and like whatever else. Like you left a bunch of that stuff like just sitting there and you were like, no, I'm going to go take off the dude in the tower. I can't remember anyone's name. I know there's Titus and Luna and Waka. Or I remember the main characters.
There's this thing with the I's and the E's where when I was growing up, and I'm gonna just say it was Ryu, but now he's Ryu, and it was Titus, but now he's Titus. But yeah, Titus, whatever.
Yeah.
Yuna, Waka, Luna. Luna? No.
Yuna. There was Yuna, Lulu.
That's what it was.
Yuna, Lulu, Riku, Waka, Auron. Kimari.
Yes.
And is that everyone?
I'm sure we got everybody.
I think that sounds mostly like everyone. And then you had
the Al Bhed crew and Sid on the on the airship.
But what was the guy who dressed like a retired, like he was young, but he was a diplomat, but he was a retired like samurai. He looked like a retired samurai in a kimono that was red, and he had purple hair. I don't remember his name.
Seymour Guado.
Is that what his name was?
Yeah, he had the.
Yeah,
he had
so
the.
You fight with him one battle, and you kind of see what he's like. But then you get to a fight where like, oh, he's a bad guy, and you got to fight him. And that was
spoiler alert. If you haven't played Final Fantasy X and you don't know, I don't care. It's like he's a bad guy.
It's over 20 years old.
Oh my god, it's 20 years old.
Are you looking this up?
Keep talking. I think it's 20 years old this year, but keep talking.
Okay. But in any case, you fight like a dragon or like some sort of like basilisk or something with him, and he's like, oh, he's kind of a badass. You're like, oh, it's like look at I get this guy, and he's like super fucking powerful. He's like 10 levels higher than you
motherfucker. Final Fantasy X turned 20 5 fucking days ago. I'm done.
Nah, we're still
Final Fantasy 20 is 20. Final Fantasy 10 is 1 year away from being able to order a beer.
Resident Evil's probably there.
Done. I was a grown up. Like I was a grown up when this game came out. I had bills already when this game came out.
Yeah, I was graduating high school.
Son of a bitch. Anyway. Now I'm depressed.
So, Jeez. So anyway, you're playing with this badass guy who's like way higher level than you, and you're like, oh wow, this is awesome. And then like, the next big story beat is like, oh, he's a bad guy, he's trying to conquer something and whatever else the fuck, and you're like, oh, you're fighting him. And you're like, oh shit. And like, if you hadn't done the side pieces, if you hadn't played some blitzball, if you hadn't done X, Y, and Z, like here you are getting your ass handed to you by the guy who was, on your side at the time. So I was like, oh, so yeah, but like that's the same thing. But if the remake of Final Fantasy VII has a little more balance, so like the story can keep you going. Awesome, but what are they gonna do with the part 2? Like,
I don't want to. It's look, this was 60, and the little add-on is 20.
Yeah,
or it's either 10 or 20. There's a potential by the time we get to the end of this.
It's like a $400 game.
It's like people who are early adopters of Street Fighter V are $300 in right now. Like that's not even, and that's off the top of my head, and I'm not. That's conservative.
All the character packs.
Yeah, like the character packs, and then
maps,
season packs, season passes, and then the amount of time you have to play to earn it. Like it's a lot. Mm-hmm. That's the territory that we're delving into potentially here. But when I go back to play Final Fantasy VII, the original, right? I have a fondness for it because I played through it and I enjoyed it when it first came out.
And I'm sure that's the same thing with me with Resident Evil. Like, I can go back and play Resident Evil 0 and be like, or not 0, Resident Evil 1 on PlayStation, and like, yeah, it looks like garbage, but like,
here's the thing,
I have a fondness for it.
My nieces and nephews, they get of age to play video games, and they're like, "What did you play, Uncle Jeff?" I'm not showing them Final Fantasy VII. That's not a thing. That's not what I'm going to show them. There are other games I'll show them, but not that one. And so that prompts me to say, like, how do we give that a pass? Right? Yeah. Like, that's the ultimate test, right? Mm-hmm. Like, right now, Independence Day was a good movie when it came out, and Independence Day is a good movie today. Like I watched it on July 4th, and it was like, yeah, welcome to Earth. And you're saying all you're saying all the shit with the thing, and you're saying all the catchphrases and blah blah blah. There are movies from back then, like watch Batman Forever now. Isn't that the ultimate test? So like if Grand Theft Auto 3.
Batman Forever does not. It can't. Like it's one of those movies that like I liked it at the time, but now watching it, whatever, I'm like, oh, you so silly.
Yeah,
like it's not
Schumacher. You rapscallion. You trying to do Batman.
So like it's not super terrible, but like
it's bad.
It's bad. Like I mean, like it's not unwatchable, but it's bad.
Today Jeff goes to the movie
Batman
and sees the first 20 minutes of Batman Forever. I'm leaving and asking for a refund and doing something I tell you guys never to do because I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm writing a letter. It's something I never do, but I will.
But you catch it free on TNT. It's like, oh yeah, I'll fucking watch this with the commercials and shit. That's all good.
While I'm doing chores, like while I'm ironing or folding, like cooking, doing something that like writing an essay, like writing a letter about the movie, something. Like it's not my prime thing. So in the same vein, like Grand Theft Auto 3 did not age well, right? Final Fantasy.
You didn't have a memory card for that game.
You
played that game.
Yeah, for the first
from rip a couple times.
Like seriously, for the first little while that I had, there were times where I actually left my PS2 on all night.
Yeah, to play it the next day,
and had it on pause.
I did that with Sonic the Hedgehog.
Which one? Which one?
The original one.
Oh, okay.
On Genesis, like when it was like, okay, like I've got to I've never made it to 7-3 before. Like but I'm tired. I got to go to sleep. I'm getting yelled at. So, all right, pause, turn the TV off, set the controller right next to it, kind of tuck the Genesis back a little bit so no one sees the light on.
Yeah.
And then, like, come back to it the next day and be like, oh, yeah, word. Yeah, like, okay, 7-3, let's do this. Like, I'm going for Robotnik.
I'm refreshed and my cognitive is good. Mm-hmm. But Sonic 1, Mario 1, Super Mario World, they aged it's like when your favorite chef makes like that little tiny plate of something, right?
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. But I love Grand Theft Auto, but Grand Theft Auto 3, I loved it back then. I play it now and I'm like, what the fuck? Right? Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy 8 was actually better graphically. It was better, like, maybe the gameplay hit or miss. It's arguable. Like, you could say, oh, I like the gameplay in 7 better, blah, blah, blah. The story was definitely weird, right?
Yeah. But I think I probably would have played more Final Fantasies if I had played 8 first, because 8 seemed more together. Like, it seemed like a downgraded version of 10, because it's on a previous generation.
Yeah.
7 seemed like, oh, this should be on Super Nintendo. Like, this should be...
That's a whole other story.
But I understand what they had to do with it, because it's like, it's already a huge game with math and whatnot ever else, because it's on 4 fucking discs on a PlayStation. Like, I don't know of a whole lot of games that did that.
Yeah.
I know I had one. I don't remember what it was. But I mean, but it's that's a massive undertaking to kind of do. Well, Resident Evil was one of those, because I think it had 3 discs. It was Claire's side, Leon's side, and then disc 2, which was, I think both of them went to that, or maybe it was 4. Whatever. But Resident Evil 2 was one of those.
We're definitely going to do a part 2 to this, because it's something we need to dive deep into, but we want to know, this is a rare opportunity for you to battle our apathy. What do you guys think of remakes? Like, would you prefer to see new games, even if it's new, like a new part to an existing game, like
a sequel that should have come sooner?
Yeah, like a part 2, part 3 of a game that you love, or are you good with
like a Legacy of Kain, Blood Omen 3?
Yeah. But or are you good with
it'll look like Avengers with a cash shop and all kinds of shit. You want to have the blood drinking thing? Like, yeah, you get that's 200 EoaS coins or Crystal Dynamic coins.
I fired up Avengers. I might not even get the Black Panther. Like,
it's
get
free.
To play back. No, I'm not get it, but I might not even play. Like, I went on the helicarrier and I went into the skin shop, like the cosmetic shop, and they had 3 things there.
Yeah,
and I threw up in my mouth, because I'm like,
really?
Oh, this is what we like. If you've been loyal to the game, which I haven't been, but if you've been playing all this time and getting all the currency, in-game currency, this is what you can pick from, is 2 fucking
some of them
nameplates, an emote, and a skin that you probably already have
or don't want, because there's a couple of them on there right now. Because after I had my house redone, which, go watch those episodes.
Yeah, it's the Tile Saga,
the Tile
Saga 1, 2 through 3.
So, but I was playing Avengers up until then. Also, as a thing, the week before